Okay, we got two things we need to talk about. Michael Schneider's The Economic Collapse blog. The upcoming trade war between the U.S. and China will be the biggest in the history of the planet. And let's not forget, old Ken Fromm from way back in the day, the very good one that gave Lindsey Williams all of his great information that was accurate, talked about currency wars and trade wars would be absolutely coming. Watch China. China's the big one, he said. Very concerned about China. And the other thing, Simon Black, the sovereign man, got an email from him today, the typical subscription thing. And he's got this one titled, "This New Bubble is Even Bigger Than the Subprime Fiasco." I started reading a little bit of it and said, yep, this is worthy. This is JSNP 4, seal of approval, worthy for sure. So I think I want to start off with the one from the Economic Collapse blog, the trade war. The United States and China are the two largest economies in the world by far, and the upcoming trade war that is about to erupt will be cataclysmic for both sides. The Trump administration and the Chinese government are both gearing up for a prolonged trade war, and this is going to have very severe implications for the entire global economy. During the campaign, Donald Trump repeatedly stated that we can't continue to allow China to rape our country. And he was quite correct about that. Over the past 10 years, the U.S. has run a trade deficit of over $2 trillion with China. And as a result of imbalanced trade, we have lost tens of thousands of manufacturing businesses, millions of good-paying jobs, and hundreds of billions of dollars worth of tax revenue. And let's think about something, though. China and the U.S., when it comes to any other part of the world, we were always known, us in America, as the American lifestyle. Man, would I love to live like those Americans, have their American lifestyle. Man, I want that. Gosh, that's why everyone wants to come over here, right? You don't have all these other, you don't have the illegal refugee problem. I'm talking the illegal ones that cross the border. Not talking about the wide open Syrian and North African come on over, though. I'm talking before all that, we had South American, mostly Mexican, coming across the border constantly. You never really heard of too much of anything like that in these other, even in the EU zone. You really didn't hear about it like we had it here. Maybe because they didn't have a South American country directly attached to their border. But there are some other ones, and there are some poor countries over there, and it makes you wonder, why didn't they flood into those people's country? Because we, over here, allegedly, and again, this was true, had the best lifestyle. The American lifestyle. And I'll never forget George Bush Sr. in front of a huge crowd of people in the 90s talking about, the global countries and whatnot. And I've got news for them. The American lifestyle is not negotiable. And the crowd went apeshit. Yeah, American lifestyle. We use 25% of the world's output in our country. Yet we're only, I think, 5% of the world population, something like that. Small percentage. I forget the exact number. But we have an issue. We had this American lifestyle. And boy, do we love our American lifestyle. Man, do we love it. We are not about to give it up and go third world status just so we can compete with the Chinese in trade. Well, here's the issue. They already have slave labor, child labor, all of it. It's already there. Working for pennies. Literally, a few dollars a day, as in US dollars worth of money a day. Well, if I work 16 to 18 hours, I'll make, and they're doing it. Are you telling me the Americans today in this country are going to compete with that? Boy, oh boy, do I think we have a rude awakening coming. And as the trade war goes, there's going to be a dollar war, currency war too with it. It's automatic. They devalue, we devalue. We devalue, they devalue. What happens to gold and silver when that happens? You don't want to know. Well, maybe you do. If you hold some, you'll be real happy. So clearly something needs to be done to balance our trade with China and other countries, but the situation must also be handled delicately because the trade disruptions could bring substantial short-term economic pain. But they say no pain, no gain, right? Prior to winning the election, Trump threatened to unilaterally impose a 45% tariff on Chinese exports. Unfortunately, China is not just going to sit there and take whatever Trump throws at them. Every single time the U.S. has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods in the past, China has responded by slapping tariffs on U.S. goods. And this time around, the Chinese are already preparing a very harsh response, even though Trump has not officially made his move yet. And they say the policy advisors believe the Trump administration is most likely to impose higher tariffs on targeted sectors where China has a big surplus with the U.S., such as steel and furniture, or on state-owned firms. China could respond with actions such as finding alternative suppliers of agricultural products or machinery and manufactured goods while cutting its exports of consumer staples such as mobile phones or laptops, they said. Other options include imposing tax on other restrictions on big U.S. firms operating in China, or limiting their access to China's fast-growing services sector, they added. So when this coming trade war erupts, economic activity will be reduced significantly. And considering the fact, well, hold on, wait a minute. Raise your hand if you've been watching my last dozen or so videos. Economic activity sucks with a capital S right now. We haven't even had a trade war start. There's no currency war even starting. And the numbers are horrible. Retail, awful. Housing starting its decline. It's already happening. I've already showed you a million things. GDP revised, double revised, triple revised, quadruple revised, down to 0.9% now. From originally like 2.1 or 2.2. Then it was 1.9, 1.8, 1.7, I think. No, it was like 1.9, then 1.7, then 1.2. Now it's 0.9. So make that like 5 revisions. The party hadn't even started yet. When the coming trade war erupts, economic activity will be reduced significantly. It already is being reduced. Can you imagine? And considering the fact that the U.S. economic growth is projected to be about 1% in the first quarter of 2017, that could be more than enough to push us into a deep recession. Some of the biggest U.S. exports to China include airplanes, autos, and agricultural products, and the Chinese are ready to attack on all of those fronts. The following comes from CNN, the Clinton News Network or the CIA News Network, or just CNN. Here's what Global Times, a newspaper backed by the Communist Party, had to say about how Beijing would respond to tariffs of 45%. A batch of Boeing orders will be replaced by Airbus, the paper said Monday. U.S. auto and iPhone sales in China will suffer a setback, and U.S. soybean and maize imports will be halted. But once again, something must be done for the long-term good of our country. We have been allowing the Chinese to flood our shores with super cheap goods, but meanwhile they have already been hitting our products with ridiculously high tariffs. And here's just one example. U.S.-made cars exported to China face tariffs of at least 25%, including American-made Cadillacs. The American-made Jeep Grand Cherokee cost $27,490 at U.S. dealerships and costs at least $85,000 in China, in U.S. dollars, of course. What we have with China today is very far from free trade. And if they want to trade with us, they need to do so on a level playing field, as Trump's been saying. But China will never allow that to happen. As Donald Trump has correctly stated, they have been raping us for years, and they are going to fight very hard to keep anything from upsetting the status quo. Trump has got to do something for the long-term good of the U.S. economy, but he has also got to try to find a way to avoid a major trade war, because a major trade war would be exceedingly painful for both countries. Most Americans don't realize this, but more iPhones are actually sold in China than in the United States. And it is being projected that Boeing will sell nearly 7,000 airplanes to China over the next decade. By the end of 2015, Chinese consumers bought 131 million iPhones. That's like 1 out of 3 Americans. Matter of fact, less than that. The total sales to U.S. consumers during the same period stood at only 110 million, which, funny enough, that is about 1 out of 3. 330 million, there's about 350 million. Anyways, and iPhones are only a small part of U.S. exports. Boeing, which employs 150,000 workers in the U.S., estimates that China will buy some 6,810 airplanes over the next 20 years, and that market alone will be more than $1 trillion. So what happens if all or part of the economic activity goes away? According to one study, in the short term, millions of U.S. jobs could potentially be at risk if a major trade war happens. Millions of American jobs that appear unconnected to international trade, disproportionately lower skilled and lower wage jobs, would be at risk, according to the PIIE study. And of course, a major trade war would hit American consumers very hard as well. Just think about it. When you go into Walmart or a dollar store, are more of the products made in the U.S. or in China? I'll be honest with you. I might venture and say I don't know if any products that I've walked into Walmart had a made in the USA sticker. I challenge you, go down any shelf randomly and pick up something and look at it. Where's it from? I'll be floored if you find something made in the USA. Now, maybe I shouldn't say floored, because it might be the only freaking thing in the entire store you find that's made in the USA, which proves my point still. Massive stuff made in China all over the shelves. And remember, made in the USA, that stuff was built to last. Nowadays, it's made in China, it'll last a little while, but it's so cheap, I'll just throw it away and get another one. And that'll last a little while. I'll throw it away because it'll break. I'll go get another one. That's how that works. So we're dumping stuff in landfills way more frequently than we should be. That's a whole other issue. A trade war would hit all of us in the wallet as cost of living goes up. And considering the fact that about 2/3 of the country is essentially living paycheck to paycheck, that would not be a good thing. So yes, our trading relationship with China definitely needs to be rebalanced, but Trump needs to find a way to make this transition as minimally disruptive as possible. A major trade war is just one of the black swans that could push us into the kind of economic nightmare scenario that I've been warning about for a very long time. And sometimes a trade war can serve as a prelude to a real war. The South China Sea has become a major sticking point between the U.S. and China, and the Chinese are getting ready to cross one of the red lines that Barack Obama established while he was in office. Beijing has plans to start construction on the disputed Scarborough Shoal this year. China has reclaimed land in both the Spratly and Parsa Islands and constructed military outposts, but it has been hesitant to start construction on the Scarborough Shoal. Zhao Ji, the mayor of Shenzhen, an administrative base for China's South China Sea activities masquerading as a city, said this week that China intends to construct environmental monitoring stations on a number of territories in the South China Sea, including the Scarborough Shoal. So how will Trump respond when construction on Scarborough Shoal actually begins? It will be very interesting to watch how this plays out. The relationship between the U.S. and China was starting to deteriorate badly even before Trump was elected, and it is very easy to see how it could totally break down in the months ahead. And considering how interconnected the global economy is today, the U.S. and China could easily end up dragging down everyone else with them. And I'm pretty sure that was the plan anyways, wasn't it? So this other thing, let's talk about this, the bubble. This new bubble is even bigger than the subprime fiasco. Sovereign man. In 1988, a bank called Guardian Savings and Loan made financial history by issuing their first ever subprime mortgage bond. The idea was revolutionary. The bank essentially took all the mortgages they had loaned to borrowers with bad credit and pulled everything together into a giant bond that they could then sell to other banks and investors. The idea caught on, and pretty soon everyone was doing it. As Bethany McLean and Joe Nocera described in their excellent history of the financial crisis, All the Devils Are Here, the first subprime bubble hit in the 1990s. Early subprime lenders like First Alliance Mortgage Company had spent years making aggressive loans to people with bad credit, and eventually the consequences caught up with them. Let me ask you a question. Does this sound familiar from 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8? By chance? Famco, which is that First Alliance mortgage thing, declared bankruptcy in 2000, and many of its competitors went bust as well. Wall Street claimed that it had learned its lesson and the government gave them all a slap on the wrist. But it didn't take very long for the madness to start again. As you know, by 2002, banks were already loaning money to high-risk borrowers, and by 2005, all conservative lending standards had been abandoned. Borrowers with pitiful credit and no job could borrow vast sums of money to buy a house without putting down a penny. I told you before, remember the ninja? No job, no income, no job, ninja? Everybody's approved. By 2007, the total value of these subprime loans hit a whopping $1.3 trillion. Remember that number, $1.3 trillion. And of course, we know what happened the next year. The entire financial system came crashing down. Duh, it turned out that making $1.3 trillion worth of idiotic loans wasn't such a good idea. By 2009, 50% of those subprime mortgages were underwater, meaning that borrowers owed more money on the mortgage than the home was worth. In fact, delinquency rates for all mortgages across the country peaked at 11.5% in 2010, which only extended the crisis. But hey, at least that's never going to happen again, right? Except I was looking at some data the other day in a slightly different market, student loans. Over the last decade or so, there's been an absolute explosion in student loans, growing from $260 billion in 2004 to $1.3 trillion last year. So the total value of student loans in America today is larger than the total value of subprime loans at the peak of the financial bubble. And just like the subprime mortgages, many student loans are in default. According to the Fed's most recent household debt and credit report, the student loan default rate is now 11.2%, almost the same as the peak mortgage default rate in 2010. This is particularly interesting because student loans essentially have no collateral. Lenders make loans to students, but it's not like the students have to pony up their iPhones or anything else for security. That's what made the subprime debacle so dangerous. Millions of homes were underwater, so when borrowers didn't pay, lenders didn't have sufficient collateral to cover their loan exposure. With student loans, there is no collateral. Lenders have no security to recoup their loans. So when students don't pay, someone's going to take a hit. That someone will likely be you. That's because hundreds of billions of dollars of these student loans are either owned or guaranteed by the United States government. So as borrowers stop making payments, it's the taxpayer who will suffer yet another massive loss. Let's be honest though, there's something seriously screwed up with this system. Young people are pushed into the system by a society that places an irrationally high value on university degrees. Kids are told for their entire lives that if they study hard to get into a good school, there will be a great career waiting for them. For many young people, this turned out to be a total lie. In fact, Federal Reserve data once again shows that for at least 25% of the college graduates, salaries are no higher than for people with just a high school diploma. 1 out of 4, that's not very good. Not only that, when they do have the job, it pays a little bit better than the high school student. The high school student doesn't have a huge debt to pay back, but they do. And when you add that in, factor that in, you're better off being the high school student. Racking up so much debt will hardly seems worth it. It seems bizarre to begin with that an 18-year-old will know what he or she wants to do in life to the point that they will that they should take on $50,000 in debt for a piece of paper that might not even make them marketable. What did any of us really know at age 18? And how many of us could have accurately predicted our life's path? Very, very few. Again, I wanted to be an auto mechanic. I wanted to work on cars. Went to a technical school for high school. Learned auto mechanics. Got an on-the-job training kind of a job. Stayed there for several years. I was a service manager at one point. And I don't want to do this. Don't like this anymore. Do not want to do this. I like computers. I like that technology. That's where I want to go. And that's where I've been ever since for, 15 plus years, probably 15 years now. So if I would have got some kind of degree, something else, not that you really go to college for automotive, but I would have wasted the money. Would have went over here and been doing what I'm doing now. And yet there's an absurd amount of pressure to force young people into the system that heaps debt upon them. If you're a young person about to go down this path of debt, I suggest 2 alternatives. Number one, look overseas. There's a multitude of top-ranked universities around the world that you can attend for a fraction of what you might pay at home. Number two, seek mentorship. The master-apprentice relationship worked well for thousands of years, and it's so simple. If you want to be successful, learn from successful people. If you want to be great at something, find someone who's already great at it and learn from them. And if you're not sure, find someone who you respect, admire, someone with whose activities and values excite you, and make yourself indispensable to that person. Until tomorrow, Simon Black. Fantastic article. It's absolutely right. And that's the funny thing. $1.3 trillion. Oh, well, they could repossess the house, sell that debt to the Federal Reserve at 100 cents on the dollar, even though that's garbage, get their money back for the banks. Who's getting anything from the student loan debt? There's nothing there. Again, no collateral. You don't have to, they don't come get your house. They don't come get your car. They don't get your iPhone. They get nothing except government-backed guarantee. And who pays the government-backed guarantees? That's you and me. We get F'd in the A again. That's how that goes down. Take care.